Hello and welcome to Catholic Focus. I'm your host, David Nalieri. Today I'm joined by Karen Zizzo in studio. She's the author, motivational speaker, and life coach. And today we're going to be speaking about the power of miracles and the reality of prayer in our lives. She's the author of the book, Ask and You Shall Receive, A Miracle for Stephen, which tells the inspirational story of her 7-year-old son and the miracle in his life that transformed her and her family. Karen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Let's start off, take us back to that January day, 1987, when your 7-year-old son, Stephen, he comes home from a hockey game,
right.
And you and your husband discover something that will change the rest of your lives.
Well, you know, sons and fathers going to hockey games, it was just sort of a normal Saturday morning, and my husband Richard brought Stephen home and took off his hockey equipment and discovered that there was sort of like a lump on the right-hand side of his neck. Mm-hmm. He didn't think much of it, but as the hours in the day, you know, went along, he noticed that the lump got bigger and bigger, and he was starting to get concerned. So we thought we would watch it and just wait and see what happened, but it did start to get larger. It was almost the size of an orange by the end of the weekend. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My husband's a family physician, I should tell you, so he was a little concerned because he thought if it was on both sides of the neck, it might be mononucleosis, it might be a viral thing, but I think he was getting quite concerned, so he asked me to take Stephen to the doctor on Monday morning, and our family doctor. And as you know, doctors don't take care of their own children because they'll either look for something that is there or not see it, right? Because you're not really objective when you're dealing with your own kids. But we did go to the family doctor on Monday, and our family doctor concurred with my husband, but said, you know, I think we should do a chest x-ray. And I'm not quite sure why, but let's just be safe and do a chest x-ray. So they did that, and we came home, and I brought Stephen home, and it was Monday evening, and it was supper time, and the phone rang, and it was the radiologist calling my husband, and he said, are you sitting down? And he said, no, should I be sitting down? I mean, we really weren't thinking anything, you know, was bad at that point, but he asked him to sit down, and Richard sat down. He said, I have to tell you that we found a 7 by 7 centimeter mass in your son's chest, which is the size of a grapefruit. He said, this is very, very bad, but we'll have to start with the test tomorrow and see exactly what we have to deal with.
And what was the diagnosis once you go into the hospital with the initial thoughts of the doctor? How did
Okay, well, we were in hospital the very next morning, and they took a biopsy of the neck. They found cancer cells under the microscope, and because they saw the tumor in the chest, they immediately labeled it neuroblastoma, which is cancer of the lymph system. It's terminal in a 7-year-old. Sometimes a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old can survive, but there's not much evidence that 7-year-olds survive neuroblastoma. It's very devastating and a fast-moving cancer of the lymph system. So that was devastating, and the doctors that day told us that our son would be dead in 3 months. I guess we were in shock, and I just knew that, and because my husband was a doctor, it came to him right away that there was nothing that medicine was going to be able to do for Stephen. And for me, it was like you're right against the wall, and I guess I just knew immediately if Stephen was to live, it was only going to be if we had a whole lot of people praying for him.
And so you had prayer from your family, from other churches, not just Catholic, other denominations as well.
Right.
Tell us about how you spread this message far and wide about Stephen, because some people have told you the real miracle here was also the amount of people praying, I believe.
Yes. I think people were so shocked in some respect that we were asking for so much prayer and we were so public about it. I guess I knew that I was going to lose my son, and I was willing to ask everybody to pray. And no one said no to me. So it was our church, it was the school. I was teaching college at the time, the college, my husband's practice, all friends and relatives. And we asked them to ask people that they knew and their networks. And we heard that there was a United Church praying for us in Florida, and prayers had gone as far as the Vatican and Rome, just because people told people. It was like throwing that stone in a pond and watching it. And our parish priest, he said, you know, irregardless if this was a miracle or not, I saw the miracle of prayer because I saw it go throughout our whole community. I saw everybody praying for you because you asked for it. You know, and they used his name at Mass, and I have a beautiful story of Sister St. Bridget, who was a nun with the Sisters of St. Joseph. Mm-hmm. And my husband actually had been the doctor for that convent for a little while, and he knew Sister St. Bridget. She was a 93-year-old nun, mm-hmm. and he felt she had a direct line. Mm-hmm. And he called the convent, and he asked if she would pray for Stephen, and she said, of course, I want his picture. And what is his name? And she put his picture in her room, and she prayed for 48 hours straight. She was 93, such that the Superior General called my husband and said, Dr. Zizzo, Sister St. Bridget hasn't gone to bed. She hasn't slept. Can she stop praying now? And it's kind of a cute story. My husband said, no, you leave her alone. She'll know when to go to sleep and when to eat. She's praying, and she was like a prayer warrior. And I do believe that, her prayers were significant, along with everybody that was praying.
So as the mother of Stephen, now we move towards where he's hospitalized. They're going to do surgery to, I guess, open up his chest. Mm-hmm. And what ways did you feel those prayers? Did you feel yourself being strengthened as you went through this process?
I don't think I could have gotten through the whole process if there hadn't been all of the prayer, because I could palpably feel it. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. And I was only 33 at the time. I was a 33-year-old young mother with a 7-year-old son in hospital, 5-year-old daughter, and a 2-year-old son at home. And I felt that I was given strength. I could feel it. It's hard to explain, but I felt like I was riding above it all, like I was being buoyed up in prayer, and I was given strength. I was given strength to do the things, to ask for the things, to kind of direct what needed to be done, almost unbeknownst to me. You know what I mean? Like I almost felt like I was being guided. And I know that was due to the amount of prayer, because I could feel it. I've never ever felt that feeling quite again that I did feel at that time, because I knew that was a very special time. And the prayer there were thousands of prayers. And no one said no. Everyone has children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews. If you asked for prayer, they said sure. And they did pray.
Take us through what happens next. At this point, you're told your son's going to be dead in 3 months. What is the doctor's plan of action, and how do you come to realize that the prayer may have, in effect, healed your son?
Well, the diagnosis was made on a Monday, and they wanted to do surgery by that Friday. They wanted to take out the tumor in his chest. They called it debulking the tumor. They thought it might give him a few more weeks or a few more months. Initially we thought, well, why do it if he's, going to be dead in 3 months? But then we thought, well, no, maybe it'll give him more time. So my husband signed the papers, and they did say when they went in to take out that tumor that because it was hitting the aorta and hitting the spine, that if they nicked the aorta, he could die. And if they nicked the spine, he would be a paraplegic. And I'm thinking, how much more can you put on us at that point? But we still had the faith that, it needed to come out and that it would go fine. I tell you, though, that just before the surgery, my mother and my mother-in-law and myself, and I saw it as a beautiful triad of 2 grandmothers and a mother, praying that God would guide the surgeon's hands so that they wouldn't nick the aorta and they wouldn't nick the spine, and that they'd be able to take that tumor out whole so that Stephen would not die on the operating table. And that's exactly what happened. I can't even repeat the prayer. It was almost like people were praying for us. And I said vocally, out loud, a prayer holding my mother and my mother-in-law's hands, and they were crying and I was crying. But we said this prayer, and it was powerful. I've never felt that again either. It was just absolutely powerful. They came out with that tumor in a K basin, and they showed it to my husband, and they said, I don't know, but this looks like it might be a benign tumor. It's fully encapsulated. There's no little tentacles coming out from it as though it had spread. And we're going to run it down to the lab and have them, kind of cut it up and see if, there's cancer in it, and under the microscope. It's exactly what they did. They came back and they said, this is a benign tumor. But they told us before they went into surgery, 99.9% chance that it's malignant. Don't even think that it's anything other than malignant.
Incredible.
So now these doctors said to us, well, you've won the lottery. We can't explain this, but this is good, obviously, that it's not malignant, but we're mystified. And so a lot of people have said, well, maybe it was a misdiagnosis. Maybe it was a misdiagnosis at this point. Maybe it was prayer starting to manifest itself. I can't help thinking about mind over matter and the power of a whole bunch of people praying and actually changing something.
Absolutely.
You know, the power of intention. Yeah. When you've got that much energy,
right.
you know.
Now, you were not out of the woods yet.
No.
Because there's still 2 tumors.
That's right.
What was the prognosis at that point?
Now they changed the diagnosis to T-cell lymphoma because they still found cancer cells in the neck biopsy. So they said to us, instead of him dying in 3 months, you may have a chance at life, but you're going to have 3 years of chemotherapy. That Stephen would have to be admitted. So they put the Hickman catheter into his heart, and they got him all prepped for chemo. They wanted to administer that the following week. And that was also very difficult because everything we had prayed for, and we had prayed for discrepancy along the way too, because my husband kind of knew, being in the medical profession, that things aren't black and white, and they can't actually proceed to do treatment if they kind of don't know what they're dealing with. They almost kind of have to wait. So it's almost like we were wanting to wait for time. But it was just extremely interesting what happened next. After the surgery, and he was in there for a week, you know, I mean, he had tubes coming. I mean, it was quite extensive surgery. We said that we thought we would like to go home for a week just to get everybody's emotions kind of balanced. We'd been through an awful lot, and we wanted to take him home. The physicians didn't want him to go home. They felt that we were making a big mistake by taking him home, but maybe because my husband was a physician, he said, look, we just want to go home even for a few days, and we'll come back. I mean, you're not going to start chemo, you know, for a few days yet. We just need to get balanced out a little bit. And it's kind of interesting. We asked everybody to keep praying, but my husband was fearful that 3 years of chemotherapy. Back in 1987, chemo was pretty tough as compared to chemo today. Chemo today, it's not quite as harsh as what it was. I'm not medical, but what people were experiencing in 1987. He felt 3 years of chemo, and you don't stop that process. You can't have it for 6 months. It was a whole 3 years that he would have had to go through. I think he feared that Stephen wouldn't make 3 years, and that would kill him.
It comes across in your book, always a little bit of a tension sometimes between you and your husband, who had a strong conviction in the power of prayer and holding out hope in your son recovering. And then doctors always seem to have this negative view, initially, of course, 3 months to live, then wanting chemotherapy. So they were kind of questioning your decision. How did you proceed from there? I guess every day monitoring his health and you know, it was sort of like they had a protocol they wanted to follow, and we saw what was happening too, and it was changing. They initially said he was going to die. They said that the tumor in his chest was malignant. It came out benign. They wanted to start chemo right away. We said, let's wait. Yeah, we were kind of fighting them a little bit, not to say that we weren't taking it all in, you know, assessing everything along the way, but I guess we saw the power of prayer starting to happen before our eyes, and all the people that were praying for us, and we just, we didn't want to give up yet. I guess that was the thing. We didn't want to give up yet because we saw good things starting to happen. So by taking him home, we thought we'd just have a little respite from it all, and my husband promised he would bring him back to the hospital as soon as he spiked a temperature, if this got any bigger, whatever. But in fact, what started to happen when we took him home, and I asked everyone to continue to pray because we weren't totally out of the woods yet, you know, this tumor on his neck started to recede and started to go down right before our eyes, and we thought, whoa, wow, this is great. And so when we took him back, you know, couple of weeks later, and then we had tests at 6 months and a year and 2 years and 5 years. They never found anything after that, but they had originally had cancer cells under the microscope. So your son never had any other surgery, any other recurrence of cancer? So he never did have the chemotherapy, and I can't tell you how many times we would run into nurses and doctors in our city who, you know, expected that he was going to come back, or expected that we were going to be back, and they never were back, and wondered what happened to Stephen. And when we said, well, he's fine, they just could not believe it. You know? So when you're asked now, or even in the years immediately after Stephen's amazing recovery from the illness, when you're asked point blank, was he cured by a miracle? What has been your answer? I say that the power of prayer was what this was all about. And it was about love, it was about faith,
It was about hope, and it was about the power of prayer, but it was about prayer, not just our personal prayer, but a lot of prayer, a lot of people, and believing. I would say, like, my book is Ask and You Shall Receive, but asking and believing and receiving, belief is a huge component. I didn't just hope that Stephen would be healed. I believed he could be healed, and I hung on that, you know. And so you're asking me about other people, you know, and I get this all the time. People will say, well, I prayed for my child. I prayed for my parent, and they died. And I say, I know. It's very difficult. I'm not God. I don't know those answers to those questions. I just know that there's a bigger plan, and sometimes, you know, we're privy to some of that and sometimes not. And I just know that whatever we ask for, He hears all our prayers. And sometimes we get not always what we want, but we do get something, and it's discovering what that is. And the main thing throughout all of it is that there's usually growth of some sort or other, right? And I'm a believer in that we can always look for something positive. You might not initially think that there's anything positive in a tragic situation, but if you can try to look for the good and stick with that as much as you can. Because I think humans tend to default to the negative and tend to default to the worst scenario, and you can't let yourself go there.
So your message is not so much, you know, do what I did and you're guaranteed a healing.
No.
It's believe in that power of prayer, believe in the hope that we have in God.
Yes.
And look, use the example what happened to me. So
yes, exactly.
There's a couple of elements of your book that I found very inspirational, and I want to talk about them because while the book is really about the power of prayer, one thing that came across very strongly to me is the love of a mother and a father for their son. And in particular, you talk a lot in the book of the relationship that your husband had with your son, and how that was a huge component of him getting through the illness. Can you talk a bit about that and different things you would do to try to help him get through that trial he was going through?
Well, like any parent, you know, you're feeling everything for your child, and the last thing you want to do is lose your child. So, you know, I almost, though, feel that in some respects my husband and son were somewhat primed for this, because right from a little guy they were very, very close. And I know that Stephen was a very lucky boy that his dad was a doctor, because he was able to go into all of the procedures with him. And one of the things that strikes me as being extremely important and has a lot of symbolism around it is when Stephen was having a lumbar puncture, he had many, many tests to determine if all his other organs were fine, and he was only 7. It was unbelievable what he went through. But this one was a very painful one, the lumbar puncture. And Rick was in the room, my husband Richard was in the room with him, and the technicians wanted to strap him down because when you put, you know, needle into the spine, it hurts, and they didn't want to hurt him because normally you would move around and it may not go the way it should. So he didn't want to be strapped down, though, and he said to my husband Rick, I don't want to be strapped down. And Richard said, well, Stephen, it's going to hurt, and they don't want you to move, because if you move, they might hurt you. And he said, no, I don't want to be strapped down. And he said, okay. So my husband said, okay, Stephen, it will hurt, but I will hold your hand. And when you feel that pain, you just hold my hand, and I'll take that pain. You just let all that pain come into my hand, and it'll go right through me and all the way to China. And, you know, it was kind of symbolic, but that's exactly what happened. He didn't move, and when he had the pain, he transferred it. So it's in your mind, you know, transferred it to his dad. His dad took it all, and he totally trusted his dad. And when I was writing the book, I went back to that example, and I thought, oh my gosh, that is so symbolic of us holding God's hand or Jesus' hand when we're going through anything, any challenge, and we can't do it alone. And we don't know, you know, we have to have somebody help us through. Just think about holding his hand, and he's there with you. It doesn't mean we're not going to go through our challenges, all of them, and we're all going to have them. I say to people when I'm speaking sometimes, nobody goes through life without challenges. Nobody gets through scot-free. But you know, if you can hold on, you know that it's just like the poem Footprints, which I love, which is, you know, sometimes you wonder where God is, and he said that's when I was carrying you and holding your hand when you couldn't do it alone.
Absolutely.
Right?
The other element of the story that I found very intriguing was you write about, obviously it's a physical ailment, and your son suffering with the cancer and the tumor, but also you felt throughout the process a presence of evil that was almost spiritual and was something that you had to deal with, not just the tumor, but also this presence. Can you talk a bit about that struggle and how maybe prayer helped you get through that as well?
I don't know why, but I felt like there was a battle going on. That there was a battle, and we had to win the battle, and we had to win these mini battles to win the war. There was one night in the hospital, and I don't know if Stephen was dreaming or what, but you know, a mother has, it's not to say that a father isn't, but it's quite intuitive in terms of, you know, their child. And I was sleeping on the cot beside Stephen in the room, and he, in his dream, was just saying, "Get them off me, get them off me," and he was like screaming. And this was while he was hospitalized. And I wasn't sure what was going on, but I immediately got up and started to pray over him and said that this is a child of God. You know, only good is to surround him, and anything that is not good has to leave. And I was very Mother Bear again. I was very adamant. Things like that happened. There were quite a few little examples of you just don't quite understand what it is, but it's almost like you knew there was something going on in the unseen world too. And I just knew I had to cover him in prayer, cover him in, you know, Jesus' blood, and just... and
that continued long after you returned home. And you write about, in your book, one of the principles that comes out is that there's nothing more powerful, I think, to quote you, than the prayer of a mother for her child.
I think so. It's powerful. Like, we'll do anything to save our children. Not to say that a father won't, because my husband was like amazing through this too. But I guess I felt that this child was not going down without every atom of my being and everything that we could pull together to make a project and a mission of getting him well. And if it wasn't going to be that way, if it was God's will that he not live and that he was to be taken, I would need God even more to help me get through it. It surprised me that I wasn't mad at God throughout all this. You know what? I think it was so serious that I knew from right at the beginning I needed him, and I needed him big time. And it wasn't good. And it was more than me needing him. It was going to be everybody else's prayers in addition. That's why we went public with it.
A lot of our viewers are probably curious now. This story, of course, takes place in 1987. Give us a little update on what happened to Stephen. How did his life progress after that?
Well, he was very healthy from then on. I don't think he had anything much more than a cold. And he went on to high school and university, and he went on to medical school. And he got into medical school in Sydney, Australia, and he's just graduated. He's interning at St. Vincent's Hospital in Sydney, Australia, and we're hoping to get him home this April or May 2009, back to Canada, and hopefully he'll be practicing here as a doctor.
Does he remember very well everything that happened? How does he reflect on his experience?
He does. He remembers the love. He remembers everybody being there for him. I think he finds it hard to believe that he actually had a cancer that he could have died. He keeps asking, because he was only 7 at the time. I think he's just amazed at all the people that prayed for him. And he's a product of, like he'll even say it, he knows he's a product of the power of prayer. And he is a physician, so it's going to be interesting to see how his life develops when he knows there's that component to add to medicine. And I have to even say, with my own husband, it changed how he practiced medicine with his own patients. He'll often say, "This is as far as I can take you medically. Now it's between you and God. You know, whatever you need to do to get your life right, or to forgive, or whatever you need to do." And he saw that very clearly too. You know.
So this incident with your son Stephen occurred 21 years ago, and it was 2 years ago you wrote the book "Ask and You Shall Receive: A Miracle for Stephen." Now you're speaking with us today, and you've become a well sought after speaker about the situation you went through with Stephen, the power of prayer, and translating that also to business groups and others as well. What motivates you all these years later to keep on returning to the story and to bringing back the themes that you learned from this?
This almost tragedy many years ago has now become a gift, and every time I tell this story and every time I share this story, it's a blessing. It's a blessing to me, And I know that it's a blessing to the people that I talk to because I get it back, and I don't do it for me. I do it because I know that God wants the story told, and He will open the doors, and it's going to go where it needs to go. And that's exactly what happens. And I've sold so many books, I can't even believe it, but it's because it's God's book. And I remember saying when we were praying for Stephen that I would tell this story and I would give him the credit because that's why he's here. And I know he is. And I will tell anybody because I know what I know.
Thank you, Karen, so much for being with us today and sharing your story. If you're interested in booking Karen as a motivational speaker or purchasing her book or audio tape series, you can check out her own personal website at karenzizzo.com. And if you have any questions for us, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at focus@saltandlighttv.org. Until next time, I'm your host, David Nalieri.